Most people believe that respect is something you demand, earn loudly, or prove through force of personality. But if that were true, the most aggressive voices in the room would always be the most respected. And we know that isn't how real life works. Think about this for a moment. Have you ever noticed how some people barely speak, never explain themselves, never chase approval, yet the room subtly shifts when they enter? Conversations slow down. People listen more carefully. Boundaries seem to appear without being announced. This is not coincidence, and it is not charisma in the traditional sense. It is psychology at work. The human brain is constantly reading signals, micro behaviors so quiet that we feel their impact before we consciously register them. Long before someone decides how to treat you, their nervous system has already made a judgment about your emotional stability, self-control, and internal confidence. And those judgments are formed in seconds, then reinforced through patterns. Here is the uncomfortable truth. People do not treat you the way you ask to be treated. They treat you the way your behavior quietly trains them to. Every pause you take, every reaction you restrain, every boundary you enforce without words sends a message far louder than confrontation ever could. Today, we are going to explore the silent habits that rewire how people perceive you, habits so subtle that others won't even realize why their behavior toward you is changing, but they will feel it. And once you understand this, you will never see social power the same way again. Quiet self-regulation is one of the most underestimated psychological forces in human interaction. It is the ability to notice an emotional reaction rising inside you, anger, fear, embarrassment, the urge to defend yourself, and choose not to hand control of your behavior over to that emotion. This is not emotional coldness. It is emotional mastery. When a person reacts impulsively, the nervous systems of those around them immediately register instability. Even if nothing is said out loud, people feel it. They become cautious, defensive, or subtly dismissive. In contrast, when someone remains composed under pressure, the brain of the observer interprets this as strength, safety, and authority. From a psychological standpoint, emotional regulation signals a well-integrated internal system. It tells others that you are not easily destabilized, not easily manipulated, and not dependent on external circumstances to remain grounded. Over time, this shifts social dynamics. People begin to approach you with more respect, choose their words more carefully, and think twice before testing your boundaries. Calm responses interrupt conflict cycles. Pauses slow down power struggles. Silence, when emotionally regulated, becomes a form of control. Without raising your voice or asserting dominance, you quietly establish yourself as someone who cannot be pushed off center, and that changes everything about how others treat you. Boundary signaling without words is one of the most powerful yet misunderstood aspects of social psychology. Many people believe boundaries must be explained repeatedly, defended emotionally, or justified logically. In reality, the human brain does not learn boundaries through explanation. It learns them through consequences and patterns. When your behavior consistently changes in response to how you are treated, others adapt automatically. This process happens below conscious awareness. No confrontation is required. For example, when disrespect is met with emotional withdrawal rather than argument, the interaction loses its reward. When inconsistency is met with reduced availability instead of over-accommodation, the nervous system of the other person registers a shift. Over time, they adjust, not because you demanded respect, but because your behavior trained them. Psychologically, this is operant conditioning in a social environment. What makes non-verbal boundaries especially effective is that they remove power struggles. There is nothing to debate. You are not asking permission to protect your limits. You are simply acting in alignment with them. This communicates self-respect at a deep level. Others begin to sense that access to you is conditional on mutual respect, not emotional negotiation. As a result, people test you less, take you more seriously, and often correct their own behavior without being asked. The boundary becomes felt, not announced, and that is why it works. Measured speech and strategic silence alter social dynamics in ways most people never consciously notice, yet deeply respond to. In everyday interaction, many individuals speak quickly, over-explain, or fill every pause out of discomfort. Psychologically, this signals anxiety and a need for validation. The brain of the listener picks up on this immediately. When words come too easily, they lose weight. In contrast, when speech is intentional and pauses are allowed to exist, attention sharpens. Silence creates tension, and the human mind instinctively tries to resolve it by listening more closely. Strategic silence is not withdrawal, it is presence without noise. When you take a moment before responding, it signals thoughtfulness and emotional control. Others begin to assume that your words are chosen, not impulsive. This increases perceived intelligence and authority, even if the content of your speech remains simple. From a psychological perspective, silence shifts the power balance in conversation. The person who is comfortable with pauses unconsciously leads the interaction because they are not driven by the need to perform or please. Over time, measured speech trains others to slow down around you. They interrupt less, explain themselves more clearly, and pay closer attention to your reactions. You are no longer competing for space in the conversation. You become the reference point. Without raising your voice or dominating discussion, you quietly influence how interactions unfold and how seriously you are taken. Consistent micro-behaviors are the invisible framework through which people decide how much they can trust, respect, and rely on you. In psychology, the brain prioritizes predictability because unpredictability consumes mental energy and signals potential threat. When your small actions are consistent, how you arrive, how you listen, how you respond, how you follow through, you create a sense of stability that others feel even if they cannot articulate it. These behaviors seem insignificant in isolation, but repeated over time, they form a clear psychological profile. Showing up when you say you will, keeping your tone steady regardless of status differences, and responding in similar ways across situations quietly teach others what to expect from you. This reduces uncertainty and the brain rewards that reduction with trust. In contrast, dramatic gestures followed by inconsistency create confusion. People may be impressed briefly, but they do not adjust their behavior long-term. Micro-behaviors also train boundaries. When respect is consistently acknowledged and disrespect is consistently disengaged from, others learn the rules of interaction without being told. This consistency removes emotional negotiation from relationships. People stop testing limits because the outcome is already known. Over time, you are treated as someone grounded, reliable, and psychologically solid. Not because you demanded it, but because your behavior never contradicted itself. Internal validation over external approval is a quiet psychological shift that radically changes how others respond to you. When a person depends heavily on praise, reassurance, or acceptance, it creates an invisible pressure in interactions. Others sense that their reactions carry emotional weight, and this subtly alters the balance of power. From a psychological perspective, approval-seeking behavior signals that self-worth is externally regulated, which often leads people to take you less seriously, even if they are not consciously aware of why. When validation comes from within, your behavior changes in subtle but important ways. You no longer over-explain your decisions, chase agreement, or adjust your values to maintain harmony. This does not make you rigid or cold, it makes you emotionally anchored. The nervous systems of others register this stability and respond with respect. Conversations become more direct. Manipulation attempts decrease. People are less likely to test you because there is no emotional leverage to exploit. Internally validated individuals move through social spaces without constantly checking how they are perceived. This lack of self-monitoring creates a calm confidence that cannot be imitated through performance. Over time, others begin to mirror this perception back to you. You are treated as someone whose presence is self-sustaining, not dependent on approval. And in psychology, self-sustaining systems naturally occupy positions of influence, even without trying to. When you look closely, none of these habits are loud, dramatic, or attention-seeking. That is precisely why they work. Human behavior is shaped less by what is said and more by what is consistently demonstrated. The mind of the observer is always asking one silent question: is this person internally stable? And the answer determines everything that follows. Quiet self-regulation, unspoken boundaries, measured speech, consistent micro-behaviors, and internal validation all communicate the same message without words. You are not easily shaken, not easily controlled, and not dependent on external forces to define your worth. This changes the rules of interaction. People adjust their tone. They pause before crossing lines. They treat you with a level of seriousness that cannot be demanded or negotiated. The most important realization is this: respect is not something you chase. It is something that emerges when your internal world is coherent. When your emotions are regulated, your actions aligned, and your sense of self anchored within, the external world reorganizes around you. Not instantly, but inevitably. Psychological power is quiet. It does not announce itself. It reveals itself over time through behavior that never contradicts itself. And once you embody these habits, you no longer need to ask to be treated differently, because people simply won't know how to treat you any other way.